LS500 Instruction. Today we're going to talk about instruction, which is one of the main functions of the reference librarian. Okay, if you work in public libraries, if you work in school libraries, or if you work in academic libraries, you will have to do patron instruction. Especially in my experience as an academic librarian, I can tell you that while I was working as an academic librarian, I had to do a lot of instructions to the community, especially to students, but also to professors and to staff. The same thing will happen if you're working in a public library. Okay, you have to provide instructions to your patrons. And for school librarians, the same thing will happen too, because you have to teach the kids, the children, how to use library resources. Today, as I've mentioned before many times in this series of lectures, the problem has become that we have too much information, too many resources. So instruction, it's a key part or fundamental part of being a reference librarian, because we have to teach our clients, our patrons, our users how to use the information resources. Information resources that can be in the library or that are outside the library that we can access via the internet through the World Wide Web. www. So this is a very important function again of being a reference librarian. Here we have three quotes, and the first one comes from Samuel Green, 1876, and he says, "Give them as much assistance as they need, but try at the same time to teach them to rely upon themselves and become independent." And this is very important. And this is something that I want you to get out of this lecture. We don't want our users to be dependent on us. We want them to be independent, to be able to use information resources, information technology within the library and outside the library too. That's what we have to aim at. We are teaching, we are instructing how to use databases, for example, academic database, or how to search in the internet, how to open an email account, etc. But what we want to have is independent citizens, okay? Independent citizens that can use electronic resources, printed resources, and of course information technologies. Okay, ALA, the second quote, encourage all librarians to include instruction in the use of libraries as one of the primary goals of service. Again, and I said this at the beginning of this lecture, that one of the main functions of the reference librarian and of the librarian in general is instruction, because we have to provide instruction to our users in how to use the services of the library. But we cannot limit ourselves to what the collections and to the services that we have within the library. We have to be able also to instruct our users how to go beyond the boundaries of the library. Okay? And the third quote is successful bibliographic problem solvers who learn through information use. And remember something, the idea about using information is to solve a problem. Okay, when somebody visits a library, it's because they have an information problem that needs to be solved. And that's where we enter. We as professional librarians help the user solve his or her informational problem. And one way to solve that problem is instructing, is teaching, is educating the user to search for information in order to address his or her information problem. Not only the one the present problem, but future problems too. Of course, there are different approaches and different models. But again, when I said theoretical approaches, I guess we're talking about models of library instruction or library education. The first one is library orientation. The second one is library instruction. Third one is bibliographic instruction, and finally, information literacy instruction. We currently do the four theoretical approach or the four models. Okay, doing one does not mean that we can do the other. When we talk about library orientation, what are we talking about? Well, we introduce users to the services of the library, to the resources of the library, to the collections, what we have in our holdings, how is the building, what is the layout of the building, where are the restrooms, where is the bathroom, where is the reference desk, etc., and how the materials are organized. So library orientation is a very basic level of instruction. Is for the users to become familiar with the library and the functions, the services. We can also talk about hour of operations, etc. Or services that are provided, collections that are there, access to the internet, how to use computers, and so on and so on. So library orientation, it's a fundamental by the way, activity of the reference librarian and of the librarian in general when we have new users to the library, because they may have many questions. How do I get a library card? How do I check material? When do I have to return that material? Can I check a journal or not? How do I get? How do I sign in for a database? For example, do I have access to a database? Do I have remote access to a database? How do I get an electronic book? Can I download my books to my Kindle or to my computer or to my cell phone, etc.? So these are this is considered part of the library orientation. Then we have another level or another theoretical approach or another model. Again, please, when we talk about models, we're trying to represent reality. They are never equal to the reality. Okay, this is in this case, we're using these models just for our understanding of the situation. But that doesn't mean that if we do library orientation, we're not doing library instruction. There are also mixed models where we can do library orientation and library instruction, for example. In library instruction, we go into more specific. We provide more detail. So we talk about the use of libraries, the institution-specific procedures and policies, and collections, and again services too, and how the library operates in general. So if we see this as a line, I guess the first point of that line or the milestone would be a library orientation followed by library instruction. But let me say again a word of warning. One is not exclusive from the other, okay? And we cannot separate library education in general in library orientation, library instruction, bibliographic instruction, and information literary instruction. This is how we teach this class, but we have to understand that they follow a continuum line that is not divided. Okay, sometimes when I used to do library instruction, I would library orientation, I would do also library instruction, because I would go into more depth, and I will have a question and answer session, and the students that were there wanted to have more information. So I went from a library orientation approach to a library instruction approach. Okay? But it's a good idea always to name things So if we are required in our work to do library orientation, for example, we know this is the basic orientation of how the library works. If we are asked to do library instructions, then then we go more into detail, more in depth on how to use the library. Okay, so library orientation would be an introduction to the library, and library instruction would be a detailed instruction on how to use a library, a more detailed instruction on how to use the library. And then a third level would be bibliographic instruction. For example, when I was working as an academic librarian, what I mostly did was bibliographic instruction. Okay? Because I was teaching the students of the university how to locate, retrieve, access information, and even how to storage and manage that information. Okay, and that was very important for them to be successful in their schooling in the university. Because sometimes when they come from high school, they don't know very well on how to use a library, because in our educational system we are used to using textbooks. Okay, but some professors at the university level, I do that in some of my classes too, I don't use a textbook. I let my students locate the information resources. Why? Through the use of academic databases, for example. And many professors at the university level require that your information sources be or come from peer-reviewed journals, for example. So it is very important to do bibliographic instruction at any level. School, media level, public library, and also academic libraries. Okay, but you will see this, I guess, in my own experience, you will see this a lot in academic settings. So we have location, retrieval, and accessing information, problem solving, and critical thinking. And this is very important, because if you and remember back at the beginning of the semester when we were talking about the reference interview. Well, what we do with the reference interview, when we ask those open and then open questions and then ended questions, is to make sure we are understanding what the client, what the user, what the patron wants to search, what is his or her informational problem. Well, the same idea is here. We have to teach the user to make sure he or she understand exactly the type of information that he or she needs, because depending on the informational problem, you may need one type of information or another. And I think that's also true, for example, in the classes that I teach. And when I ask you to do this or that, you may use a different type of information, and you have to think critically. How are you going to solve the information problem posed by your professor, for example? Okay. Sometimes I have been asked questions, and my response is I don't respond, because the idea is that you begin thinking and training as a professional, that you begin thinking about how are you going to solve a problem, because you won't have me there all the time answering questions. So I let you go ahead and start behaving like a professional, and that's very important also to instill that idea to our users and patrons. Another very important skill to teach is principles of organization of information. Of course, we are not going, when we do bibliographic instruction, we are not going to teach cataloging and classification, because as we understand, that takes more than one session. However, we have to show to our users how the information is organized in the library. Okay, why? Because if we don't teach that, how are they going to find the information? It's amazing if you have been in a large library, either public or academic. Well, and this is your first time there in a huge library, huge building with many stories. It's believe me, it's very hard to find information. You may search the OPAC, the online public access catalog, but from there to get the, let's say you're looking for a book, to get the book, well, it's a longer proposition, because you may have to take the elevator, you have to go 2 or 3 floors up, and then you are confronted by large stacks full of books, and it takes you longer to get to the resource, to the physical resource, than to search for the resource. So how the information is organized, how the resources are stacked, etc. It's a very important it's a very important skill to have if you want to be, of course, very efficient in locating information. Another very important idea, and I have taught in this semester, is how to search for information. Why? Because nowadays, and this is something that we have to understand, not most, but much information comes in electronic format. And we have an OPAC, we have a public access catalog. We have to learn how to search the catalog. And we have the internet or the World Wide Web, the open World Wide Web, where there are millions and millions and millions of information items. And then we have other type of databases, being economic databases, academic databases, legal databases, industrial databases, trade databases, etc. Depending on the organization, depending on the type of library, how specialized is or not. But there are many resources available to users now. And the problem, and I have said this, I know, hundreds of times, becomes how to access the correct information. So we have to teach search strategies. Okay, I did a couple of videos, I think, on how to search. We may use Boolean operators. We may use keywords. We combine several fields, searchable fields. We may use the index. We have to use the thesaurus, etc. Why? Because we want to make the search as accurate as it is possible. Okay, we want to have a high recall, but with accuracy. Okay, and that's of course it's something that we can learn, but we also have to teach to our users. So please pay special attention on searching. Some of you will be catalogers. Some of you will work in the front desk. Some of you will work in acquisition, etc. But I think, and I said that from the very beginning, for me, the reference function is the main function of the professional librarian. So we have to be very good at searching. Okay, we have to have those skills. We have to be very proficient and efficient in searching. But we also have to be able to teach those skills. Probably not the same level that we have acquired, because in our case we are professionals, and he has taken not only a degree, but he has taken some time to learn to search professionally. But in any case, we have to be able to teach what are those skills that are necessary to survive. And I think this is not a strong word. I think we have to say to survive in today's world. Okay. In my case, my mother. This is just a personal story. My mother is 80 and something years old, and of course she doesn't know how to use electronic resources, and I have to help her all the time, because without those skills is very hard to survive in today's world. Many things that we have to do have to be done through the World Wide Web. Many things that we do have to do with the federal government, with the state government, with agencies, etc. You have to do it through the use of the World Wide Web. And if you don't have any instruction or any experience, well, it's also a very hard reality to face. Okay, it's just like facing that huge library and those huge stacks full of books, and you only see letters and you don't know where you are. Well, the same is true if you don't have any skills using or searching electronic information. Another thing that is very important, and of course I will do a lecture on this, is to identify and evaluate information sources. Again, and I will repeat myself millions of times, the problem has become that we have too much information. So, identifying good quality information and evaluating and assessing information sources is the key of survival. And finally, information management. And this is very important. And this is very important for us too. Sometimes we have too much information in, let's say, in our computer, in our hard disk, in our storage component. And we have to organize that information in folders, or we have to have a program to organize our bibliographic citations, for example. So there are many ways to organize information, because if we don't do it, it becomes unmanageable. So information management it's at the heart of a good and reliable system of problem solving. Okay, and this is something that we have to learn. I'm sometimes really amazed when I see some computers, and many of you may amaze me when you see the monitor and it's full of documents and folders and everything. And I said to myself, I said, oh, how can this person find anything in this computer? Because they don't have any management skills. Okay. They don't have any organizational skills of information, but they seem to work fine like that. But so we have to have some degree of information management and information organization. The other level, or the other theoretical approach, I guess, is what it is called information literacy instruction. And here is the idea: we learn how to learn. And this is a philosophical proposition, and it's something that it comes with time. Another story: if with my kids, he always has done very well in school, but things are getting harder now that he's in 9th grade. Before that, he never had to study. Now he's beginning to study, and the first question he asked me is, "How do I study?" Because he doesn't know how to learn. He has to learn how to learn, okay? And that's what school is for, okay? But however, we have to be open. And one of the things I told him is, well, son, you have to be open about learning, okay? That's the first step. Wanting to acquire more information and more knowledge, being open to learn. So one of principles that we have in this approach is knowing how information is organized. That's the key. Knowing how to find information. Use, share, disseminate information to help others. Create information and knowledge. And the last one is the most important, in my opinion, is being a lifelong learner. Why? Because we are in an information environment. We are in an information society. We are in a knowledge society. So we have to, and this is something that we may or may not believe this. It doesn't matter, because things will keep developing and evolving. Things are changing rapidly, increasingly with more speed. And if we don't understand that we every day we have to learn, we are going to fall behind. Okay? So, and this is not only for the instruction that we give to our users, but this is a matter of importance for ourselves. We have to understand that it's not enough to go to the university and get your bachelor's degree or your master's degree. No, that's not enough. You have to understand that in today's world, you have to be a lifelong learner. In the Middle Ages, for example, with what you learned when you were a kid, first, life was very short. That's the first thing that we have to, when we visualize the Middle Ages, we have to think that probably the life expectancy of Europeans was, I don't know, 35 years or 40 years or even less. I don't know, let's say 40 years. So in the Middle Ages, life was very short. Then you didn't have too much time to learn. And so your first 10 or 12 years, when you were considered a child, you were able to learn. And from there on, you started to work in agriculture or in a city, wherever you were. But you were already an adult at a very early age. But information was very scarce. Knowledge was very scarce too. And only few people, and I'm talking about the elite, probably the religious elite and the the queens and the kings and some of those people had a little bit more of information and more knowledge and were able to read and write. But most of the people, 97% of the people, they didn't know how to read or write. And their life didn't change in those in the span of 40 years since they were born until the day they die. It was the same every day. Well, that was in the Middle Ages. That was 1,000 years ago, or 700 years ago. Today, we are living in a totally different environment. First, life expectancy have risen from 40 years to 70 or 80 years, or even more in some countries. And secondly, we are living in a information environment, in an information society, in a knowledge society. And we have the means of communicating information and knowledge instantly. So there's no other way, even though we would like to be in the middle age where nothing changed, we are not there anymore. We are in the 21st century. We are in 2013, and things change daily. And there are producers, users, and disseminators of information that are doing. Excuse me, just a minute. Yes. For the interruption, I just had somebody in the office, and I had to open the door. So. What I was saying is that it is very important that all of us, not only our patrons and users, but us, that we become lifelong learners, because we are in a different time. And in the time that we're living today, in the 21st century, there is instant communication, instant dissemination, instant creation of information and knowledge, and we have to be able to absorb all that information and that knowledge if we want to remain current. These are the standards for the 21st century according to the American Association of School Librarians. And I'm going to read some, but please make sure you read them because they are very important. The first one, inquiry, think critically, gain knowledge. draw conclusions, make informed decisions, apply knowledge to new situations, and create new knowledge. Then share knowledge and participate ethically and productively as member of our democratic society. Pursue personal and aesthetic growth. Assumptions. Emphasis change from teaching to the process of learning. Okay, so and this is very important. It's not only about teaching, but it's about learning. Citizens able to access and evaluate information sources efficiently and independently. That's the whole idea of being a citizen. A citizen means, among other things, that you can access and evaluate information sources. Information and knowledge are two of the most important variables today for individual and collective success. I think there is no question about this. These are the assumptions of the 21st century lifelong learner. More specialized information demands that cannot be handled by traditional reference services, and sometimes we have to escalate the reference services because more specialized knowledge is required. The goal is learning and the method is teaching. Citizens work in independent and self-directed ways. These are the assumptions of the 21st century learner. So how do we do an instructional design? Well, instructional design is the process of developing and implementing instruction. And some of the things we need to have in that instructional design are needs assessments, goals and objectives, instructional content, learning theories, learning styles, instructional methods, instructional materials, evaluation and assessment, and administration and management of instruction. Let's see each point. Needs assessment. Need a discrepancy between an actual condition or state and desired standard. In other words, where you are and where you want to be. Okay? Understanding the user needs, collecting information. How do we understand the user need? Well, we can do literature reviews, we can do surveys, we can do observations, we can do testing, we can see website traffic patterns, we can do interviews, we can do focus groups, okay? So that's how we do a needs assessment. Secondly, goals and objectives. Goals and objectives. Desired learning outcomes or results of learning. Objective of information literacy instruction. A model statement for academic librarians. And this comes, of course, from ALA. Number 1. The information literate student determines the extent of the information needed. That's very important. The information literate student accesses needed information effectively and efficiently. Number 3, the information literate student evaluates information at its sources critically, this is very important, and incorporates selected information into his or her knowledge base and value system. 4th, the information literate student individually or as a member of a group uses information effectively to accomplish a specific purpose. 5. The information literate student understands many of the economic, legal, and social issues surrounding the use of information and access and uses of information ethically and legally. Then we see instructional content. Instructional content. Okay, we have 3 types of content. The first one is declarative content. Information that describe and tell what something is. So you have that type of content. It's information that describes and tells you what something is. Then we have procedural content. And this is information on how something is done or how to use something. And finally, we have conditional content. And in that conditional content, when to use what and how. Conditional content then combines declarative content with procedural content. Okay? Learning theories. We have some learning theories here. And if you are an educator, of course, you know more than me about these learning theories. The first theory we have here, and there may be more, by the way, is the behavioral approach. The learner responds to positive and or negative reinforcement. That's one learning theory. Okay, you respond to negative or positive reinforcement. Cognitive approach. Knowledge is formed through experience. Learning is a process. Knowledge is given. Okay, so you're giving knowledge, and then you acquire this knowledge through experience. Okay, and the constructive approach, and this is my approach, by the way, on learning. Experience and reflection. Knowledge is constructed internally. Individuals construct their own understanding of the world. I think the difference between the cognitive approach and the constructive approach is that in the cognitive approach, you assume that, for example, in my case, I'm giving you the knowledge, okay? And you acquire the knowledge. While in the constructive approach, I'm giving you information, but you will construct that knowledge internally, and that's and of course that's a different theory. Okay, I believe in the constructive approach, but not only that. Of course I have my own theory, my own constructive theory, because in my own constructive theory I believe that even though knowledge is constructed internally and it may be constructed individually, it is also constructive. Knowledge is also constructed by a group. Okay, it's not only an individual that constructs knowledge, but a group also constructs knowledge. That's my own theory. Okay. So there is a social construction of knowledge. I guess that's not my theory at all. I'm not saying I made up that theory. Probably it's a knowledge, it's a well-known theory. But I believe in that knowledge is not only constructed individually, but that it is also socially constructed. And one example is the classroom. One example is discourse, for example. When I read your posts or your questions, we are constructing knowledge together. Not only for you, not only for me, but for the rest of the class. We are in a setting where knowledge is constructed socially. Learning styles, and this is how individual learns, and they may differ too. And these are also some models, some theoretical assumptions, some perspective. Field dependent. Learns by observing, seeks guidance, likes learning in groups. That's one approach in learning. Feel independent. Learns through questions and answer. Works alone. Analytical in problem solving. That's another way to learn too. Okay, so we have two learning styles, the field dependent and the field independent. And many of you will see that you are in one model or the other model, or one approach or the other approach, or that you may be sometimes a field dependent or field independent. Okay, I myself like to place my learning style in field dependent. I like to observe, I like to I seek guidance, and I like learning in groups. But there are many people that works alone and have analytical in problem solving, and that's fine. You don't have to be one or the other. And of course, again, these are models that represent reality, but no, they are not reality. So, we have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Let's see other learning styles. There are the concrete perceivers, absorb information through direct experience. Abstract perceivers, absorb information through analysis, and these are the ones that favor in traditional education. Active processors make sense of an experience by immediately using the new information. So once you have the information, you have to use that information so it makes sense to you. And that's a very important way to be. And there are the reflective processors. Make sure of an experience by reflecting and thinking about it. So we have another way to see how individuals learn. Concrete, abstract, active, reflective. I don't know exactly which one I am. I think I'm a little bit of the four types. But make sure you think about yourself and see where you can place yourself. If you are a concrete perceiver, you are an abstract perceiver, you are an active processor, or you are a reflective processor. Instructional methods, and this is how we deliver information. Okay, and there are many ways how professors or how a librarian will deliver his information, being for library orientation, library instruction, bibliographic instruction, or information literacy instruction. We can use one methodology or we can combine methodologies. Okay, that's fine. You have to find what works better for you and what works for the audience. Take into consideration the audience and the content and the time. So we have at least 3 variables that we have to think, or 4. First, your personal preference. Secondly, the type of material the type of information that you're delivering. In other words, the content. Third, the audience. Who are you delivering that information to? And fourthly, it will be the time. Okay, and also the technological resources that you have available, the space, the technology, the information technologies, etc. So please, when you are designing I was going to say a lecture, but it's not a lecture. When you are designing an instructional methodology, think about at least those 4 variables. The content, the audience, the time, your preference, and the resources. So it will be 5 variables, okay? Let me write that down because I think that is important. Let me see if we can insert the text here. Text box. So let's put a text box here. Variables to take into consideration. Time, content, audience, preference, and information technologies and resources. Let's put resources because here I think about many things. Let me see if I can move this. And resources. And in resources, we're talking about physical space, information technologies available, etc. Okay. Up. Where's my text? Oh, there it is. I don't know if I have to put this up here. I'm gonna put it. Cancel. Okay, I'm gonna leave that there. I'm gonna put this back where it was. Okay. Let me save this. So again, for the instructional methodology that you are going to use, please take into consideration these variables: time, content, audience, preference, and resources. Preference meaning your personal preference on how you're going to deliver that content, and the resources meaning what information technologies you have available, what physical space you have, etc., etc. And these are some of the methodologies. First, lectures. There are one directional, little interaction, large amount of information, like I'm doing right now. I'm delivering a lecture, and there is no interaction right now, and I'm delivering large amount of information. Content is easily modified. I think we have already seen how I've been adding more information to this lecture. Then there are discussions. And before we go on, remember that we can, I guess an ideal would be to mix instructional methods. Okay? You don't have to do only one. If I'm going to do a lecture, that's, well, no, it may be a good idea to have a lecture and then to have a discussion. So discussion is in structure center, but you will clarify content. Group center, collaborative, share and build knowledge in a collective experience. I like that one too. Especially, of course, this is fit if you're doing face-to-face or if you're doing online but in a live session. Instructional methods. Another way to deliver content is through demonstration. Instructor performs a skill or a process. It requires concrete explanations. It requires equipment technology. It requires sequence demonstration, explanation, questions and answers, repetition by the instruction, and replication by students. So in the case of a demonstration, you need the students to do to replicate what the instructor have shown. That's a very effective way for instruction, and of course you can use that in your library. And you can use any of these methods if you're doing library orientation or library instruction or bibliographic instruction or information literacy instruction. Active learning. It provides time to process information. It combines instructional methods. Probably, I believe this may be the more efficient. If you can do but of course you have to have the time and you have to have the resources. If you can do lecture, if you can do discussion, if you can do demonstration, and you are able to do a discussion after the demonstration. Collaborative learning assumptions. This is an active learning. This is constructive process. Learning styles are diverse. Learning is a social activity. There is a positive interdependence, positive meaning because you depend on the other to learn. Small groups, face-to-face communication. I have a question mark because it can be done online too, and sometimes I have done that in some of my courses. But of course, you have to have individual responsibility, but also share and collective responsibility to do collaborative learning. And what I have seen in my classes is that when I assign a group project, students don't like to work in groups. So collaborative learning is very hard to for it to work, but it has worked. I have tried in this class in LS500 in the past. I have done some group projects with a lot of success, but students don't like it. Some of the instructional materials that we can use in any instructional methods are guides, worksheets, videotapes, tutorials. We can use websites, we can use textbooks, we can do online tutorials, and of course we can do wikis too. Handouts. These are especially important, especially if you're doing library orientation and library instruction, I think. And even for bibliographic instruction too. A handout that you can take home, that the user or the patron can take home. Standalone instructional materials, informative step-by-step instructions to support the task. That's the key here. If you have a handout where the procedure It's outlined step by step. Oh, that's very good for the user. Things to consider: content, audience, relationship with other instructional materials, permanence, meaning if this is going to stay the same in time, and the design. It has to be a good design. Other materials are exercises and assignments. It provides the learner the opportunity to practice a new set of skills. Things to consider: content, activities required in sync with learning objectives, realistic expectations, complexity of activities required in sync with audience, and feedback. Indicate if feedback will be provided or not. Instructional materials, and that's instructional technology. Learning requires action, interaction, and application. And this is very interesting because this is something that we're going to do in my special LS500 class on social media that that is going to be this winter intersession, and we're going to teach about social media and libraries, and there's going to be a lot of action, interaction, and application because the students participating in that class will have to do use social media, wikis, blogs, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc. So that's how I'm gonna do that class, and you need to, if you're gonna be part of that class, you need to be ready to get your hands dirty. Online classroom, wikis, online exercises, and online demonstrations. Okay. Finally, and this is very important, and this is something that we have to do if we have, even if we do library orientation, or which is the first step, or if we do information literacy instruction, which it would be the last step in that continuum of education. We have to do evaluation and assessment because we have to know if what we are doing is right or is wrong, and if our patrons, our users are getting the knowledge and the information and knowledge that they need. So, and what is the purpose of evaluation and assessment? The purpose is to improve instruction for the benefit of learners. Instruments on instructional evaluation. How do we evaluate? Well, we may do tests, we may do satisfaction surveys, we do quick assessment. One is called the minute paper, and that's a paper that you have to fill out. A question is, what is the most important thing that you learn after this session? And the other one, the most point, what was the least clear to you? Okay, of course you can do an experiment and you can assess before the session and after the session. And you can do a test, for example. It would be like an experiment. You have two groups, and you have the groups taking a test before the independent variable or the procedure, which in this case would be the class, and then they take another test. Okay, and you have the control group without that independent variable taking the test to see if you notice a difference in the average. Okay, but that is more complicated, and that is more expensive to design and to do. So what we do in libraries, when we teach a library orientation or library instruction or bibliographic instruction and or information literacy instruction, we will do a survey, a satisfaction survey. And it may be a very quick assessment, such as a minute paper or the modis pon, or it may be a complete survey. Of course, it cannot be it cannot take too long because people don't have a time to also do a survey. However, the idea is that you assess your instruction, because that's the only way you can get better. Okay, assessing what you have done is the only way to improve. And have evaluation and assessment as part of the learning experience. for you and for your users too. And explain to them that the idea of the assessment is not to, the idea of the assessment is improving. That's all. Okay, administration and management of instruction. Of course, depending on the type of library, if you're running a one-person library, you will have to do the instruction. If you are in a bigger system, then there will be an instruction department with librarians that do only instruction. Okay, but in my case, when I was a reference librarian, I did reference and I did library instruction too. I really enjoy, by the way, doing library instruction. And of course, you will have a program and you will have an orientation with general objective. And when we talk about orientation, we're talking about library orientation. Okay, so let's put here library orientation, so you don't get confused. It's very general. We can do workshops too, very specific tasks, such as, for example, citation. This is an example, citation, or academic put a D more, academic database search. That would be a great workshop to do. Or email, how to open an email. That would be a workshop. And of course, we'll have course-related instruction, and that's when you will work with and this is especially for academic librarians. That's when you work in a university and the instructor asks you to please do a course-related instruction. Mostly will be on a subject related, and one example, put here citation, but it will work here too. And another example will be using the periodicals or serial collection related. Or let's say if it's the subject is geography. Well, probably you can go there with instructor and show the students the map collection or electronic resources on maps and other geographic resources. Okay. And of course, there is course integrated instruction, and there are some places where the librarian will be part of a course. Okay, and it's what is called team teaching, and you will be teaching there for a semester, not in every session, but a few hours that semester in that class, and your instruction will be integrated in the syllabus of that class. Okay, so these are some of the approaches that library instruction have. Okay, all depends on the facilities, of course, and the facilities meaning the physical facilities, the information technologies, time, etc., etc. Okay, I think this is good for today. Please forgive me for the interruptions, but I had people knocking on my door several times, calling me in the phone several times. I thought, it's in the afternoon today. I thought it was going to be a very quiet environment, but it hasn't worked that well. However, I think I managed at least to provide you with a quality information. Thank you for your attention. Until next time.